Hello and welcome to the Backlot 605 podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I'm Casey Kellerman. Joined with me, as always, is my co-host, Brian Mensing. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing great. I'm doing wonderful, actually, on this episode. I'm doing wonderful.
Yeah. Really? You had to go there?
Starting off with bad puns already, right in the opening 30 seconds of this episode. Why not? That is because we're kicking off James Stewart, Jimmy Stewart month here on Backlot 605.
Your life is full of bad puns.
That is my entire life. It's very bad pun filled. But we're kicking off James Stewart month here. We're celebrating Christmas a little early with "It's a Wonderful Life." We're doing this one because of a request that we had right after I think we finished recording for the first time with our guest John Small on Mank. John, you immediately requested "It's a Wonderful Life."
Oh, it's a great movie.
Yeah.
It's such a great movie, and it's one of those. It's on every year at Christmas time, and most people have probably seen it. If they haven't seen it, they've certainly seen parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just it's a great film.
Yeah, so we got to first off welcome back to the show, John Small. We're throwing it off with another black and white movie. I just thought of that as we're sitting here doing this. We did a modern black and white movie with Mank, and now we're doing "It's a Wonderful Life," a classic black and white Hollywood cinema movie. But John, how are things going on? How is Sunny Radio? I think we'll start off with that.
Things are good. We've been busy. It's been an awesome year. We're excited to kind of have things happening again in 2021, and excited that theaters are opening. Excited that some concerts are happening, events are happening. Not all of them, of course, but it's nice to get back to somewhat normal anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was just, we'll talk about it in the box office once we get to that here in just a second, but I made my way to the Cinemark for the first time since last August, and it felt nice to just be back in that environment again. But maybe we should jump right into that then, the box office, since we're talking about it here. Interesting results here for this past weekend. Number one, giving a fatality to Mortal Kombat in the number one spot is Demon Slayer, the movie, moving up from number two last week to number one this week, $6.42 million in its second weekend out. Anime fans abound, making their way to the theaters for Demon Slayer, the movie.
Isn't it weird that the number one movie is $6.4 million? Doesn't that just seem weird?
It was
so bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
It was even worse a couple months ago when it's like the number one movie is like 2 million.
Or just cracking the million. Yes.
Yep.
This one is surprising.
Or the fact that it's an anime movie that is the one that's taking number one spot.
That doesn't surprise me. Those anime fans, they'll rush out to any anime movie in the theaters, especially a wide release one. You're looking at big bucks when you do those. And I mean, this and Mortal Kombat are pretty close here in numbers as they were last week, but both, I believe, were over 20 million last week, if I'm not mistaken. So it was over a 50% drop for both of these movies here in week two, which surprises me. It surprises me, though, that it's more than 50%.
Why is that? I mean, between 40 to 55 is where usually second week numbers drop to.
But we're at 60+% with these two movies, which it was surprising because there wasn't anything that came out of note besides this one bad horror movie that I saw. But everything else was about the same as last week. So I'm surprised that the numbers dropped that much for Demon Slayer and Mortal Kombat.
Well, Mortal Kombat has HBO Max to back it up, so I can't say much for Demon Slayer because it's not my kind of movie and whatnot, but Mortal Kombat at least has got the HBO eyes, so that at least gives me some attribution as to why that one dropped like it did.
Number two is Mortal Kombat, just under $6.5 million, 6.24 for this week. Mortal Kombat still doing strong. Again, I think these numbers reflect what Brian just said. The HBO Max subscribers are probably watching this on there more so after the first weekend out. Which isn't, I don't think that's too surprising to see. We saw that with Godzilla vs. Kong, the numbers dropping a little more. And I wouldn't expect Mortal Kombat to make more than Godzilla vs. Kong overall.
No. As somebody who's a fan of the franchise, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
This movie, it's kind of scary to think that it's a relatively established franchise, which again, like Godzilla and Kong are, but it's like this one was too middle of the road to try to break those kind of numbers.
Next up, you got Godzilla and Kong duking it out. Number 3, $2.74 million for the Battle of the Monsters here. This movie is looking like what's it called? The Monsterverse? Is that what they're calling this?
Yeah.
Will continue. Adam Wingard is in talks to do whatever the next installment is. I guess that's sort of the only movie news we had going on. Not surprising after the huge success of this movie, which I guess we should talk about. Godzilla vs. Kong has made more money worldwide than the last Godzilla movie did, King of the Monsters, in its entire run during a normal year.
That's pretty good.
Which is really good for this movie. I mean, during a pandemic, topping your last movie, that's quite impressive.
I wonder if that's because there are fewer movies to choose from and people still want to go out, and these guys are the ones that kind of took the gamble. Do you think that's part of what it is, or just fewer options on screens?
I think it's a combination of that. I think it's also a combination of you have people who, I'm a Godzilla fan, I want to go see this. I'm a King Kong fan, I want to see this. Where a Kong fan may not be a Godzilla fan, but they want to go see it because they're going to go see their monster. Because I look at it this way: it's like, what would these numbers look like if it would have been, a Godzilla movie by itself or a Kong movie by itself? Would it have made the same kind of numbers during the pandemic? So I think it attributes to the fact that we've got two fan bases coming together for one movie.
Mm-hmm. And I think it opened up at the right time. Theaters were starting to really roll out their reopenings here. AMC's reopened for this. New York, LA have all their theaters are pretty much open for their chain theaters. So that definitely helped with the numbers. And being the kind of first big blockbuster that reopened theaters, I think that was a very smart move for Warner Brothers to put this one right in the midst of that. Whereas Wonder Woman 1984 was like testing the waters of the HBO Max experience while also having theaters closed, which definitely didn't help with that movie. But I think they hit a home run here with Godzilla and Kong right away here as theaters reopen. So I definitely think that was a big part of it too.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Number 4 is said horror movie that was opening this week. $1.83 million for Separation from acclaimed.
And it separated money from your wallet.
It did separate some money from my wallet. I wish I could have that back.
You're not recommending it?
Not a recommend, and I think it's on my own fault that I spent money on this. Like I said, this is my first time back at the Cinemark since August, and I was like, I'm just craving a really bad horror movie, and I think I picked the best option that was available at this time for Separation.
How did you even I didn't even know this was even a thing until you posted on Facebook that you were at the theater to go see it. I'm like, I didn't have to even Google what the Separation was. Like, what made you go, hey, this sounds like a great idea?
Actually, I saw the trailer on YouTube and it looked really fun. It's basically about this family who the mom passes away, and in order to kind of cope with it, this girl has these puppets that her dad made. And the puppets are really creepy looking marionette puppets. And one looks like a clown and one's like a creepy witch. And they start to become like more real than you would expect a puppet to be. And so like there's this guy who's a contortionist in real life. He plays one of the puppets in real life and like crawls upside down as one of them. So it had cool imagery, but is this story bad?
You sound like you just described the Puppet Master.
It's a better, I don't even know if I would say it's a better version of Puppet Master, Brian. That's quite the feat for this movie. This movie's trying to be Kramer versus Kramer in a spoopy movie. And it doesn't do that very well. It's from the director of The Boy, which is a guilty pleasure of mine, but not a smash hit amongst horror fans. But
it's from a director where the bar was set kind of low.
It was set kind of low, and that was exactly the type of movie I was looking forward to seeing. I just needed a palate cleanser of a bad horror movie in the theaters, and this was definitely that. I'm looking forward to a better horror movies in the theaters once Spiral, the Book of Saw, comes out and Quiet Place 2 comes out. I'm looking forward to those.
Oh, yes.
Rounding out the top 5, though, is Raya and the Last Dragon, $1.34 million. Still sticking around the top 5 of the box office for this Disney animated movie, as me and Brian sit and wait for this to hit Disney Plus for free.
Yeah, June like June 4th.
I think June. Yeah. Yeah. I'm still not paying that $30 or $20 or whatever it is to rent this movie.
No, and with as much as Disney has been really super discounting like digital pricing because now they've got all their stuff on Disney Plus, even then it's like, how much money would one be willing to actually spend on it to actually see this and or keep this movie once it comes on Disney Plus? So,
John, have you pulled the trigger on any $20 movie rentals at all in the last year?
No, I have not. There have been a couple of movies that I wanted to see that I finally either purchased them. So like we bought the DVD for one. It's the one with Laurel and Hardy. I think it was called Stan and Ollie.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, it was from a few years ago. And I remember seeing it thinking, boy, that looks really good. And then I clicked on Amazon and it was going to be like $20 to rent it. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to enjoy it that much. Mm-hmm. So I posted something on Facebook and then a friend encouraged me to buy it. So my wife actually bought me a DVD. So now I just own it. And it was a good movie. I'm glad that we own it. It was good, but it was not $20 worthy for me. After I watched it, I guess I probably would have paid that. It was good.
Yeah, but you would have paid the $20 to buy it, not necessarily rent it. Because that's what I've been running into. Like, I mean, even with some of these like Promising Young Woman, now it's even available to buy for $20 digitally, and then even I'm sitting here going, do I? Don't I? Like Soul was on sale for like $13. I'm like, I can't pull the trigger on that either.
And one that I waited on was Unhinged. Mm-hmm. When that came out, I was going to rent it, and I didn't. It's not because I didn't think it was worth it. I didn't really have the time anyway. We were binge watching a bunch of other stuff, so we were in the middle of different episodes of things, and I thought, I'll just wait. And then now it's just available through Netflix. So we did watch, or maybe it was Amazon, wherever it was. But we watched
it's on Prime.
And it's really good. I don't know if you guys have both seen Unhinged with Russell Crowe, but it's really good.
I think now that it's on Prime and I can watch it for free, I'm totally in to watch a road rage Russell Crowe movie.
Yep.
If you've seen the movie Falling Down with Michael Douglas, like this reminds me a lot of Falling Down. Because it's kind of the same premise where it's just this guy that's been pushed too far. He's had enough. Even though he's doing a lot of bad things, all the way through it, it's kind of hard to root against him, even though you should be. Because you're like, he just killed a man. I shouldn't be agreeing with what he's doing. But no, he's a bad guy. But I don't know. It's a great movie. So that's one that I almost bought, and then I just waited.
It's popped up. I recently just watched the new Without Remorse or whatever, the Michael B. Jordan on Amazon Prime, and it popped up. I'm like, ooh, that's right there. So yeah, it's on my watch list already.
All right, that is it for the box office. And like I said at the top here, no movie news for this week. Really, the only movie news was that Adam Wingard is in talks to do the next installment of Godzilla and Kong, whatever version they want to do next. That's about it for movie news for the week. So,
shocker.
Yeah, we're gonna just boogie on over
I read a story. Oh, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say I read a story about a movie that I believe it was like the #1 movie. This is during the pandemic, but it's called Unfriended, and they had a budget of $0. And did you guys read about this, or have you heard about this? The movie had a budget of $0, but it became the #1 movie, and a lot of it was even filmed over Zoom, which I'm trying to figure out how you do that. But I just read that story the other day, and I thought that was kind of fascinating. They had a budget. Was
it the movie Host?
No, there's a movie called Unfriended that came out during all of this.
No, Unfriended came out a few years ago, but
I think this might be a new version. I think
maybe a new
I know
one.
what you're talking about, but this is a movie that some people said, hey, you know what? We're unemployed right now. We got nothing to do. So let's just do this. What do we have to lose? Like, we might actually become the #1 movie because nobody else is putting anything out. And they did.
Yeah.
And
I think their was really good.
I think the box office total for them to be the #1 movie was like $24,000. And the majority of it was them. Like they bought out several theaters themselves. So this story was just on the internet last week. I thought it was pretty interesting. And again, because they go, hey, we got nothing to lose. And the 24 grand that they bought out the theaters, the money went back to them because, it was their movie. So thought that was it. There's no time like the present in the middle of a, pandemic to say, hey, we might actually have the #1 movie in the nation right now.
Yeah. I'll have to dig that up because all those Zoom and like Skype movies really fascinate me. Like Unfriended was the first, or The Den actually was the first one I remember watching. That was almost a decade ago when they did that movie. But those really excite me. And I wasn't a fan of the previous Unfriended that came out like 3 years ago, but I think it's a fun concept to put them out on Zoom, like those type of movies. And I know they're making another. I saw a trailer for it. I'm getting way off topic here. That's all right. It's from one of the producers of Searching and Unfriended. They're making a new movie, but it's basically this woman has to go undercover and basically disguise herself as a Arab woman and basically tries to seduce a member of ISIS. And it's based on a true story. Like it actually happened. Like. Wow. And it takes place all on Skype or Zoom, one of the two. It looks like a fun thriller. I can't watch those in a theater; they make me sick. But watching them at home is really fun. I might have to check that out when it eventually hits home. I don't remember what it was called though. I should have looked it up.
Yeah, now you got me kind of curious.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was.
But I did see that they have in development for Searching too.
Yeah. All right, you guys ready to boogie on over to our main topic for the week? It's a Wonderful Life?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. It's a Wonderful Life, 1946, the holiday classic, starring the person of the month, the guy that we are dedicating an entire month of movies towards, the Hollywood classic screen actor of James Jimmy Stewart. It's a Wonderful Life. And I guess I mentioned right away here at the top holiday movie, and now I have to give a quick little story here. When I mentioned we wanted to do James Stewart month, I said It's a Wonderful Life. We have to do it because it's probably his most iconic role. And Brian immediately said, why are we doing a Christmas movie in May?
Yep.
Now, Brian, what are you saying?
I rewatched the movie, and it's been a long time since I'd watched it from beginning to end, and I retract my previous statement. This is not a Christmas movie, and this is a very, very dark movie for being a fun, happy family film that you watch during Christmas.
I make the argument that it still technically is a Christmas movie. As much as people want to say Die Hard is a Christmas movie, then It's a Wonderful Life is obviously a Christmas movie. But I think this movie you can watch any time during the year, and I think all three of us having watched it, here in May, like this is definitely like. You can watch It's a Wonderful Life at any point, any time, because the Christmas is not the focal point of it. This could really be said at any time. It's really about this man's life, George Bailey's life. And yeah, this could have taken place at any point in the year, and Christmas is just kind of the nice tree topper at the end of the movie. But yeah, It's a Wonderful.
They're like, what holiday can we use and whatnot, since we got to make sure that we can dump people into icy lakes.
And that has nothing to do with the actual Christmas by the end of the movie.
Right.
Yeah.
But they did film it in July and August of 1946, which is crazy because it was a super hot summer. So, they're out filming this, winter scenes in the middle of a heat wave, which is kind of crazy.
Boy, that could not have felt good at all. Having to be in all very big, thick coats and stuff like that, and trying to not overheat while trying to pretend you're cold and shivering.
Well, the thing that was really interesting, I didn't realize when this had been filmed, and I just, when we watched it last year, it kind of clicked with me, and I was on my phone doing a little research while we were watching it, and it was actually filmed in July and August of 46. My dad was born in July of 1946 in California. So he was born when this movie was being made, which was kind of cool.
That's cool. This movie, I for some reason thought this didn't come out during Christmas, but it definitely did. Came out, Christmas 1946. Do I need to go over a plot synopsis for It's a Wonderful Life? Obviously everybody has seen this movie, right?
I would hope so.
But you know what? There are probably some people who have not, so it wouldn't hurt to go over a synopsis.
And it's a pretty, I mean, the synopsis is kind of just the last 30 minutes of the movie in a way too, because it really follows, I mean, it follows the life of George Bailey, played by James Stewart, who is the owner of this house loan company that that he took over for his father and basically runs with his uncle and really took over for his dad when he passed away. And he's kind of on his last ropes of trying to really make it here for his family. And after finding out that his uncle lost their payments for that they were supposed to deposit to the bank, he's on really the last bit of his string here and goes to the town. I don't know, the
tavern.
What would you call Mr. Potter in this town? What is the title you would give to him?
He was he was that. Yeah. No, he was a wealthy man, kind of a loan shark kind of guy.
Yeah. And he goes to Mr. Potter, the heel of the entire town and goes to him on his last limbs here of trying to make it for his family. And Mr. Potter has nothing to do with it because, as Brian said, he is an asshole. And that's what assholes do. But this is where George basically is sent, his guardian angel is sent down from heaven. Basically to show him what his life would be like if he had not existed. And by the end of it, obviously, Mr. James Stewart finds out it is truly a wonderful life, and he is the richest man in town. So that's basically the plot synopsis of It's a Wonderful Life. And I remember when I first watched this was in, I believe, middle school when I first watched this movie. I had a teacher that he would play this every year. Like, I had him throughout high school too. And every year right before Christmas break, he'd show us It's a Wonderful Life for the last couple of classes that we had. And I remember watching it and no one liked it because it was in black and white. And I loved it. I'm like, I don't care if it's in black and white. This is such a fun story to be told. And it makes you realize after how many times watching this that not a lot of it takes place during Christmas, like I said, which is all right because I love the setup of the story too.
For the people who want to see it in color, there's a colorized version of it as well on Amazon. And I watched that, and it was kind of hard for me to see that because I'm like, I kind of like the black and white apparently.
Mm-hmm. And you know what? That's the same thing with me too. When I saw that it was on Prime, I'm like, all right, let me get this watch and whatnot. And both of them presented themselves, and I'm like, I just can't do it. And I booted up the black and white version just because I know, to Casey's point, it's there's so many people that, these things get colorized. There's been multiple movies that get colorized because, that's what you have to do to get people to watch it and whatnot. Be like, no, enjoy it for what it was at the time that it was made. Just same as like To Kill a Mockingbird being colorized. No, watch that in its black and white, beautiful glory. And this is the exact same thing. And I think the black and white even adds to, the layers of it, especially when we get to some of the darker points in this film.
Mm-hmm.
I agree completely.
Yeah, and especially with a movie like this, where it has gone through weird copyright stuff throughout the years. Who knows who did the colorization of that and how off that could be? Because I once watched a colorized version of the Little Shop of Horrors movie, the Roger Corman version, and it was wonky. It was a weird colorization of the movie. Just did not look good. So I don't know what the colorization version of It's a Wonderful Life looks like, and who did it with a weird copyright. This history this movie's had.
That's one of the things that many people don't realize. The copyright story behind this is just as fascinating as the story itself, because the copyright expired so early that there was no royalties for a long time, so they could play this movie. So that's why it got played at Christmas time so much. TV stations could literally just say, "Hey, we're gonna put this on for 24 hours or 48 hours or for the whole month, whatever." So, and they didn't have to pay anybody. That's one of the reasons it became as successful as it did. When it first came out, it really wasn't a big hit, and then I think that might even have been part of the reason the copyright stuff kind of got jacked up because it wasn't a huge hit, but now it's one of the most iconic films from that time. And a lot of that has to do with TV stations trying to save royalty money.
Yeah. That almost sounds just as, was it the Night of the Living Dead, the first Romero movie? That because of some oversight and whatnot, it's been in public domain since it was released. So he's never been able to recoup anything from that, all because somebody forgot. Because back then, all you had to do was just put the little logo on there, and that was sufficient enough. And somebody went, "Oops." So this is probably about just as messy.
Yeah. Having worked at a very small antenna TV station, I understand the importance of public domain movies and why they are played so many times on smaller TV stations, and especially when this was in the public domain in the 70s, 80s, I think into the 90s. I think the copyright was in the 90s or early 2000s when it finally was all sorted out, where it is no longer a public domain movie, which is I find just as fascinating of how the copyright came back into being. But yeah, this is definitely that is the reason why this movie has developed this cult status during Christmas. Is much like A Christmas Story. It was just played all the time because you need something to have on during the holidays. And I mean, what a movie to have. I mean, I looked up the Academy Awards here as we're about to start the show, and I looked through every movie here. I don't recognize any of these titles besides It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah. And that's the one that we remember. And again, probably because of the copyright issue more than anything, because it was played so much. Mm-hmm. The thing that was really fascinating to me was Jimmy Stewart, when he filmed this movie, he hadn't filmed anything in a while because he had left and gone. He served his country. He went to war. And when he came back, he really didn't plan on doing much in Hollywood. Ended up taking this movie because they pretty much talked him into it. And there are times during this movie, like when he's at the bar and he's having the drink and he's shaking and he's sweating. And they actually filmed that one time. They never asked him to film it again because everybody on the entire set felt so bad for this guy because he really was struggling with PTSD. So he was an amazing actor, but he was also going through a lot of crap in his own life at the time. And, this is a guy from a small town. His dad owned a hardware store. The whole time he was gone fighting, the entire town was worried about him. He comes home, he wins Academy Award. And I think he had won an Oscar before he left to go serve. And I think that Oscar was sitting in the hardware store, in his dad's hardware store. And again, the fact that he comes back and he plays this role of Mr. Bailey just makes you fall in love with the guy even more. He was an amazing actor. I'm glad you're dedicating a whole month to him. That's really cool. And thanks for selecting this movie that I had asked you guys to do, and then asking if I'd even be a part of it. So thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
Kind of cool.
No, you make mention about the PTSD and stuff like that. That this is all news to me, but at the same time too, if you think back and after watching the movie and whatnot, I think you can really see that emerge within multiple scenes here. Especially when he's on that verge of collapse, when he's yelling at the kids, the bar scene, what you're talking about, when there's a lot of when he's showing that anxiety, it's probably best to say is that it's probably a lot of authentic anxiety that he's portraying right there.
Absolutely. And again, they didn't even know what it was called then. They didn't call it PTSD. They called it shell shock. Mm-hmm. So he had what they call shell shock, and we know so much more now. If that were to happen today, they probably wouldn't even let him do this role because, I can't imagine that it helped, for him to get home at the end of the day and have all this other stuff that he's now going through in make-believe land, filming a movie, and all the extra stress added. But one of the things that's just amazing to me is how well he pulled this together and made this happen, and everybody involved. And you got to make sure we mention Donna Reed is in this as well, and she is from Denison, Iowa. So she's from just right over the border in Iowa, and they in that community they have a thing that says Denison, it's a wonderful town, because of her being in this movie. It's a Wonderful Life. So that's kind of their town slogan.
Nice.
And they do a big thing. I don't know if they still do it, but they used to do a thing called the Donna Reed Festival. I haven't lived there in 20 years, but back then they did a Donna Reed Festival. We would go to that every year. It was always pretty cool.
That'd be cool. Fun. Yeah, I would totally be down with that. I mean, me growing up back before there was 100 channels on the television and whatnot, and before Nickelodeon could fill all 24 hours and whatnot, it was Nick at Night, and Donna Reed show was one of those ones that I grew up watching, again, in the black and white. And so maybe that's another reason why I can appreciate a black and white movie, is because watching like My Three Sons and Leave It to Beaver and the Donna Reed show. Yes. So no, it's one of those ones where it's like, this movie's so synonymous for Jimmy Stewart that I think that a lot of people forget that this is also a great Donna Reed film as well.
And I love the gentleman who played Clarence in this movie. I don't think they could have cast that role any better.
No.
Because, here's this little angel who's trying to get his wings, and, he just looks like he's I don't know. The guy's adorable.
Yeah.
And I don't remember him from anything else. He's probably been in other things, but he's Clarence to me. He's just perfectly Clarence.
Yeah, he's just a sweet old man. Like when you see him, you want to just give him a hug. Like he has that vibe to him. Like I just want to give this old guy a hug. Like he seems like a sweetheart, and that's perfect for Clarence. And like I want to talk about James Stewart, because obviously he's the guy we're doing this whole podcast over. And John, you mentioned he had gone off to war and wasn't sure if he was coming back to Hollywood. And to think about that, here in 1946, every movie we're doing after this is on the podcast is after It's a Wonderful Life. So it's crazy to think of this guy's career and what wouldn't have been if he never would go back to acting. And I do think having teaming up with Frank Capra, a classic Hollywood director, and co-starring with Donna Reed, a classic Hollywood actress, and we're kind of revitalizing his career. And now we look back at it here in 2021, and like James Stewart is, to me, the ultimate everyman. Like he has that quality to him. He feels like the guy next door, the guy down the streets. That you're
what are the other movies that you're going to talk about? I guess I haven't seen a list, or is that top secret now?
No, we're doing Rear Window, Anatomy of Murder, and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and then the other Hitchcock classic with him, Vertigo. So we'll hit all the Hitchcocks with him. And to think of that, his Hitchcock and Jimmy Stewart collaboration wouldn't have happened if he never came back to Hollywood, which is crazy to think about.
One of his others that I think is just a great movie is Mr. Smith Goes to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's not one that you're featuring, but that's another movie that if you get a chance to watch it, it's certainly worth watching. And again, it's in black and white. It's from a long time ago, but so many of the things that they were talking about in Washington way back then are still kind of the same issues that we have today.
Yep.
And his character in that is just this young, kind of wet behind the ears, doesn't even realize he's going to win, but he ends up winning and goes to Washington wide-eyed thinking, I'm going to change the world. Then he gets there and finds out, I don't really have the power to change the world. I'm like one little tiny cog in a giant machine. And that's exactly how it is even today. Uh-huh. So that's a fascinating Jimmy Stewart movie as well.
Right.
And if you think about this movie too, like this movie still has resonance today in terms of what it's talking about with banking and capitalism, and helping the smaller people while the rich stay rich, the poor stay poor. We're still talking about that 80 years later, which is insane to think about. And what better like Jimmy Stewart embodies the everyman, the person next door. Like I said, I mean, he's 6'3". He looks like just a dude that you would go hang out and have a beer with at the bar. He's just that kind of guy. And his height like really shocked me watching it this time. It's like, oh yeah, he was a really tall guy, especially for Hollywood. Like no one above 6 foot tall is in movies, but this guy's towering over everyone in this movie at 6'3", looking like a basketball player of the time.
My guess is Donna Reed had to be on an Apple box in order to be able to have some of those close-up scenes. That's the only way.
One of the other things that fascinated me about the movie It's a Wonderful Life is they actually broke a rule in Hollywood when they did this movie. And it was kind of a controversy because Mr. Potter kept that money. So the money that for people, if you've not seen the movie, I'm not trying to give anything away, but the money that the uncle lost, Mr. Potter kept that. And there was a rule in the time in Hollywood that, you couldn't have like the bad guy get away with something and like personally profit from it. So I don't know what the name of the rule was, but when I was researching this, I thought that was kind of funny that Mr. Potter, and they said, that was going to be a problem, but then they still allowed it and it still worked. but and when you think about it, there were no other movies from that time where the bad guy wins, and Mr. Potter didn't really win, but in a sense he did, because that deposit stayed with him, you know.
The bad guy never got his comeuppance. He never got what was coming to him. We don't see him by the end, really. He you know, George Bailey wishes him a Merry Christmas, and he says,
you know what? It's because he doesn't matter. And so many times people forget that. They think that, oh, that guy matters a lot because he's rich and the story's about him. It's not about him at all. It's about George Bailey, the average everyday Joe like you and me, and the difference that he made in his life. What kind of difference did Potter make in his life? You know, not really a good one. He could have. He had every tool and every ability to make an amazing positive difference, but instead he used every ability that he had to enrich himself and only himself. Yeah. So I think that's maybe the reason we don't see him at the end, is because he doesn't really matter, but George Bailey does.
Yeah, I do want to point something out, because you brought it up in regards to the money. I got curious as to, you know, the $8,000 that Uncle Benny misplaces, right?
Yeah.
That is equal to $108,000 in 2021.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's
a big deal.
That is a big deal.
Yeah.
Like they were saying houses were $5,000 earlier in the movie too. I'm like, I wish a house was $5,000.
So when I was watching this, there's that interaction between Bailey and Potter, where Potter's trying to basically get Bailey to go work for him.
Yeah.
And offers him a $20,000 salary, right? And me in 2021 going, wow, that's talk about a low ball. And then I ran it through the inflation calculator, and it was over $275,000 a year. Yeah. I'm like, wow, I would take $20,000 in 1946.
and he still said no.
And he still says no, exactly.
Yeah. Because he wanted to help people, and he wanted to help people the way his family did it, not the way Potter does it.
I think
Potter helped people too, but he helped people incur debt. And be a slave to Potter, basically.
I find it fitting that when we do last see Potter, he is at his place of business on Christmas. I think it's Christmas Eve that this does take place. And he's working. He is a total Scrooge in this situation. He is the guy counting his money at his desk at his job, not surrounded by people he loves. He's surrounded by like one crony that's always with him, pushing his wheelchair around. And that's it. He's not surrounded by anyone that truly loves him. And then you get to the end with George Bailey, and people can't even fit into his house. That's how many people love this man and appreciate what he did. And I think that's a perfect image to leave both characters on, is you know, Mr. Potter with no one, George Bailey with everybody in town at his house to pay him respect.
Do you think it would be a good idea to do a remake of It's a Wonderful Life, to make a current modern day version of this? Or do you think that's already been done with some movies that have been similar?
I think just because of the sake of the value of the dollar nowadays and the different aspects of it, I don't think it would work just as well. Then again, this is, you know, it's a modern day classic and whatnot. And there are some certain movies where I agree that some movies could and should be potentially remade or re-envisioned or whatnot to update them and whatnot. But there are those other ones where it's like, you know, just leave a good classic movie as it is, and there's no need to go back for it. And I do think this is one of them.
And I think it's one of those movies that everybody kind of takes bits and pieces from. Like even this movie is basically a Christmas Carol with certain characters, mixing them up, making some more prominent than others. Obviously, Mr. Potter is just Scrooge. He's basically the same character, except he doesn't get an arc through the movie.
He has no transformation.
He has zero transformation in this, and I think that's one thing that you know, movies are just kind of, and maybe that's the best way to do a remake. Don't ever remake It's a Wonderful Life by title and having George Bailey and Mr. Potter. Do It's a Wonderful Life with a spin on it and new characters and new storytelling, and I think that's the way to do a remake.
And I think that there's a movie that's been done similar to what you're talking about, and Nicolas Cage is in that movie, and I can't think of the name of it right now. There you go. Yes.
Family Man.
And when I watched Family Man, I instantly thought, well, this is kind of like It's a Wonderful Life. because it's a chance for him to get a glimpse of what his life would have been like if he had made a different decision. Yeah. So it's different because George Bailey got to see what his life would be like if he didn't exist. And he didn't exist at all. So he wasn't even born. So he got to see that, his brother died, and he got to see that, all these things that happened that wouldn't have happened if he was there. Family Man was similar, but it was, he was still born. He just made a different decision, and he got to see what would have happened if he had taken that road less traveled. And so it's a similar concept, but again, a different movie. So,
well, and I see this as like with The Wonderful Life, that it's the matter of, he is a person who has come to wealth. He is wealthy in the means of money, but he's also wealthy in the means of people and the relationships he's built based off of what he does for a living, And so I think that, goes a long way to the point where, what he does earlier on in the aspect of the movie, when he's at the savings and loan and he's giving up his own money so these people can get by, they don't know that he's gone through this little adventure of not being alive and whatnot. They just, at the end of it, they're coming back and they're dumping all the money out on, to basically say, hey, you were there for us, we're going to be there for you. Because again, while I'm watching this here, I'm running the numbers because I'm just out of sheer curiosity for 1946, right? I really was. It's just because like when they're at the savings and loan and they're like, okay, what can I do to get you by, kind of stuff, right? Donna Reed is like $13. Donna Reed's like, here's our money that we were going to go on our honeymoon with, right? Here's our $2,000. They were going to go on the honeymoon with $27,000.
Yeah.
Because the first guy that's like, I want my $242 was like, I'm closing my account with the $30,000 you have of mine. And I'm just, they could have just been like, hey, you know what? We're good. We don't have to do this here, but we want to do this because it's about the community. It's more than about the fact that I can hold my own. I want to be able to make sure everybody else can hold their own too. That it wasn't charity. He's like, it's not charity. It's a loan. You will get it back, but take your time. He's being friendly about this whole thing because he's like, you know what? I have money. I'm not concerned about money, but I want to be able to make sure everybody else is. Because
think about that. His character all the way through the movie was like that. So when it was time to go to college, instead of going to college, he let his brother go to college. When it was time then for him to go to college later, he didn't go to college. He stayed and kept the family business going. Every opportunity for him to give, he was always a giver. He was always one who would help other people. Mm-hmm. And that's why his living room was filled with people at the end. They were there to help him in his time of need, which is really cool.
Right.
As we're talking here, I was just thinking, has there been a more selfless character in movies ever? Or is it George? It's George Bailey, right? He is so selfless throughout this movie.
For as long as we've been doing this, I haven't found one yet. So I will give you that.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, one of the reasons that the movie stands the test of time. Even when you watch it and you go, well, that's not a lot of money. And you have to pull a calculator out to figure it out. It still stands up because you just fall in love with the guy. Mm-hmm. Even if you'd never seen him in anything else, and that's the only time you've ever seen him. If you just catch a tiny little clip, like the one that's behind you in the picture there, where, what do you want? The moon? And I'll throw a lasso around the moon and I'll pull it down here for you. I mean, you just fall in love with the guy and you go, what a cool dude. I mean,
or the fact that later on down the line, it's the first time I picked up on it before is later on in the movie, whatever, there's actually a stitched thing that they have up on the wall of where it says lasso the moon and whatnot. And it's got a picture of the moon that they've got lassoed because, it's very much the mantra of him and Donna Reed's character in this here that, they live that within their family. And I love that aspect of it.
Yeah. That's what everybody should strive to be. That kind of person. Mm-hmm. Be a George Bailey.
Is that why you have your shirt that says what it does?
My wife promised. I can't last to the moon, but I can wear the shirt that she bought me and gave to me to wear. So she's listening in the other room.
We're
She
calling
did
you out.
buy me one. I've purchased this one because I wore out the other one. So
That's the exact same as Last Swing the Moon. Then, if
Same
your
thing,
wife
same.
if your wife buys you a shirt and you wear it out, you buy the exact same one so you can keep wearing it.
Exactly.
In terms of George Bailey's character, what I'm finding here is that, especially with Jimmy Stewart, it's like no one else can play this role, and such a role that's like a tightrope to walk, because in movies that we've seen, after this, where it's kind of all this kind of goody two shoe, does all the right things at the right time, stands up for the small guy, and then by the end rallies the community and basically takes over, pushing the bad guy out. We don't care about the bad guy anymore. The community rallies around this guy. It's such a hard role to play, but it's so seamless for Jimmy Stewart, and that's why it's like he is the perfect everyman, because I can't think of anyone else that can encapsulate this role where you believe every single ounce of his humility and respect for everyone that he has around him. Like, that's such a hard role to play, and he plays it perfectly here. And even in the moments where he like explodes, like when Donna Reed's character comes back from college, he's even kind of like, I don't know about this. I'm still trying to get out of here. I don't want to fall in love with this girl, and kind of is pushes her to the side, a lot, and makes fun of the painting, the Lasso of the Moon painting she has, and won't sing the song with her, and is really just trying to push her out of his life. But yet he's super endearing because he has these feelings for her. And that's another tightrope that Jimmy Stewart does so well in this, is playing the not interested but super interested character, falling in love with Mary in this movie.
absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think if it would have come on too strong, that would have changed everything. But it was almost like, well, I don't even want to do this. I don't want to burden you with my love,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's such great comedy in this movie that still totally holds up. It's not 1940s comedy. It's comedy that still totally works today. Like, I love the scene where after they, have jumped in the pool and they're walking back home singing the song, and she's just wearing a robe and he's wearing like gym gear. And he accidentally steps on her robe and it comes off, and she hops in the hydrangea bush. And he's like, "Oh, what a situation we have here. What should I do?" "Well, I could sell tickets." It's like, that's such a great joke to throw in there, and it's a joke that totally still holds up today.
Yes.
The other thing I would say too, for the sake of the comedy, is, again, it kind of goes back to what John said here, is Clarence.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everything about him is just, he's very sincere, but he does it with a sprinkle of humor that you just, again, you can't not want to hug this guy because of, the laughter and the smiles that he gives you when, because I think of like when they're first pulled out of the river and they're trying to warm up and whatnot, and there's the guy, and, like, "I'm from heaven," and, the guy literally falls over just because, what he's saying is absolutely hilarious, but he does it with such authenticity to his character and whatnot. You can't not help but laugh based on just the scene in whole.
Yeah, I remember when we watched this in school, he would always get a lot of laughs, Clarence would, but not in a good way, which I don't find fair at all. I think he's very charming in this role, and I think they were kind of all my classmates would laugh at his goofiness too much, whereas I find it more endearing now as an adult. His character, he's a lot more endearing. He is very childlike, but it's this childlike innocence for him that just totally works. And it's like, yeah, if like it's kind of a perfect representation of angels on screen. Of, no, they're just people, but like they have this witty charm about them and feel like childs at heart, really.
And he's been trying so long and so hard to get his wings, and he finally gets his wings. That just makes you happy too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This movie, like the last 2 minutes, has so many iconic lines in this. Like, every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
Yep.
George Bailey is now the richest man in what's the town's name?
Bedford Falls. And as soon as the bell rings, he says, "Attaboy, Clarence." Like, three super iconic lines within 2 minutes of screen time for this movie. And I think that shows the iconography that this movie really has.
throughout these entire years. And now watching it this time, Brian, you mentioned how dark this movie is. I want to touch on some of the darkness because there's a shot, and I believe it's when he's leaving his mom's house after he's never been born. And he comes up to the camera, and he's right up in the camera, right, up close and personal, and has this like kind of psychotic look as he's looking both ways. And I think it's during that scene, but if not, it's a very iconic image if you watch the movie. And it like has this darkness to it of like he's a man with nowhere to go now. He's lost everything. He has nothing left at all now that he's never been born. And Jimmy Stewart's face in that scene is like really mortifying, and it looks like something out of a horror movie from this time.
Very much so.
And he's sweating profusely, and just again, that was probably easy with it being a super hot summer.
Yep.
But with him, just like you said, a person with nowhere to go, and who do you even talk to? Nobody knows you because you don't exist.
And even the simple touches of the cinematography of this movie, of when it is the real world, it's snowing, and when it goes into he's never been born, it's not snowing. And the cue to the audience when he's on the bridge and asking for one more chance at life, it starts snowing again. And that's our cue of, okay, we're back in the real world. And that's the cue back into it. And his police friend comes back up. I believe Bert and Ernie is named the Sesame Street characters of Bert and Ernie.
Cool. Bert and Ernie
are
taxi driver and the policeman.
I think they're named after this movie. I could be wrong. Too. I think I read that at some point. And I find that fascinating.
And the people down at Sesame Street are like, "Where's my dollars?"
PBS wants their donations from the It's Wonderful Life Foundation here.
I did catch that when the cop shows up. Yeah.
And I think that's another strong suit of this movie is all the side characters. You feel like you know all of them because of George, because of how well he knows all of them. And when he meets them after he's never been born, it is heartbreaking because you feel like you know those characters too. And when Martini is no longer owning his own bar, it's the other gentleman that doesn't recognize him at all. His old pharmacist. His old boss doesn't recognize him at all and has become a drunk who is not even allowed in the bar anymore. Like, that's heartbreaking when you know their history.
Because he killed a person.
Yeah.
Because George Bailey wasn't there to catch this isn't what you want to send over there. You're not thinking clearly. And he smacked him so hard that he went deaf. So he again, and that's when George Bailey was like, wait a minute, I can hear out of my ear. Because when he hadn't been born, all of a sudden that didn't happen. So he could hear out of both ears. And, so then when he gets back to reality again, he can't hear out of that ear again. So again, that's one of those weird things that you almost think, wow, how weird is it that you'd be happy you can't hear out of that ear.
Do they make any reference about that when he gets back into the real world? It's escaping me here at the moment.
I believe there is, yeah.
With the police officer, he's like, wait, can you talk into this ear again? And he can't hear it out of it. And he is super excited about it. Yeah,
he's all excited. Oh, he's so happy. My old busted up car. And, he's running down that street. Merry Christmas, you old savings and loan. I just want to do that down Phillips Avenue sometime. Just want to run down Merry Christmas State Theater.
We totally need to do that.
Yeah. Merry Christmas, Zambros.
We need to do that this winter. Is that all the same?
Merry Christmas, drunk people at Pave. I'm gonna get me a George Bailey suit and do it.
Heck yeah! Just get on one of those nice snowy nights. Just go downtown, and any iPhone will work.
Yeah. It's a wonderful town.
This needs to happen. I'm just saying.
Maybe I should film it. I don't know that I've got the build to be George Bailey, but.
We'll figure something out. We have to do it. I've always thought of that. So it's such a great ending to this movie, and he's so happy, so excited. And as we were talking here, and when I watched this movie this time, speaking of movies that kind of reference this movie in a way, I feel very much that Pottersville is totally used in the Biff Tannen timeline of Back to the Future 2. That's what that feels like watching it this time. I'm like, Back to the Future 2 took that from this. That's what that feels like. It feels like Biff Tannen's universe at that point.
Well, and again, that's also a glimpse of what things would be like if something different happened.
Yeah.
And, so it was like a glimpse of what would happen if Biff were the one to get that book. Again, this is literally just a glimpse of what things could have been if he wasn't born. So yeah, it's definitely same kind of thing.
I immediately when I heard that refresh that in my brain, and they're like, "This is Pottersville." I was like, typical asshole move. I'm going to name the city after myself.
Mm-hmm. Put my name in bright shining lights, with my name all over it, being a rich man. I don't think that has anything to do with anything that happened in the last couple of years in terms of modern storytelling at all. I don't know. I don't know. We'll move on. This movie, the opening with this, with them sledding, always gets me like confused with it with Citizen Kane. I always put the two together with the sled, except they're not using sleds in this; they're just using snow shovels, which I find endearing for this town because it totally fits the economic state of the town. Like these kids probably don't have money for sleds; they're just going to use their dad's shovel that he just finished shoveling the sidewalk for.
Well, and I mean, you figure for the time of whatever the case is, you're not going to have, the only thing you're really going to have are like those old like wood and metal type of sleds and whatnot. So, to go down the little hill that it is, that probably worked really well, especially when you got to the metal and you got to the lake and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, come on, it comes with a steering handle. I mean, it's perfect for these kids.
Yeah.
Like, that's totally something I would do as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanna.
Right.
Clark Griswold should have used that instead of his souped up one in Christmas Vacation.
I'm gonna need a really big shovel.
Right.
Later, dudes.
Well, thank you guys for having me as a part of this. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I guess I'm going to run into our. I think I hit everything I wanted to touch on, and
yeah.
I think you guys did too. So I guess we'll run into final thoughts and then my final question. So I mean, geesh, I'll start off with my final thoughts. This is a perfect movie to me. I think it is one of those perfect movies that are very rare to come across, where it's a 5 out of 5 perfect movie. Every time you watch it, you get something new out of it type of movie. And like I said, if you want to watch it during May, like we did, it totally works during May, and you get a fun little cool down moment with some of the snow scenes and stuff. But It's a Wonderful Life is it's a perfect movie. That's what I would say about it.
I'd say pretty much on par with that as well. I mean, it's one of those ones where it's just a good solid movie. Everybody's cast beautifully, and I mean, even as much as you don't like Mr. Potter, the guy who plays Mr. Potter does it exceptionally well. Like, he plays the asshole Potter to the nines, and I couldn't picture anybody being recast for this. So it is kind of sad that it didn't get the love that it did at the time, because like you said, with the Academy Awards and whatnot, we were talking about different movies that came out that year. And again, granted, we didn't come out until many years later. But we're talking about movies that you and I have never even heard of, and yet everybody's heard about It's a Wonderful Life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had a kind of a fascination with this movie, and partially because it was on TV all the time. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until, I would say, within the last 20 years, for sure. I think my wife and I probably watched it together for the first time ever, like from beginning to end. I had seen parts of it here and there, but I had just never seen the full thing. And one of our favorite movies has a reference to that. There's a movie called The Ref. I don't know if you've ever seen The Ref. Dennis Leary, such a funny movie. And in that movie, this movie is featured in that movie. And I think part of the reason they could do that was because of the copyright thing. So, but they talk about the fact that, well, I've never seen the whole thing. I've seen pieces of it here and there. And I had that exact same experience where I would catch pieces here and there, but I had never seen the whole movie. And so then we finally watched the whole thing from beginning to end. I love it even more. And then because I'm a weirdo, when we watch movies, I Google things, and I Googled and was finding out that, this was filmed during a heat wave in California in June and July of 1946. My dad was born June 17th. I'm like, that's kind of cool that I've got that connection too. My dad was literally born in the same area where this was being filmed when it was being filmed. So I don't know, just made it even a little more fun for me. But
nice.
10 out of 5. 10 out of 10.
Yes.
No, I loved it. It was a great movie.
Last question, then I'm going to leave us off with that I always do. If you were to pair It's a Wonderful Life with another movie for a perfect double feature with it, what movie would you pick?
So another Jimmy Stewart movie or any movie?
Any movie that you would feel is a perfect, like, I'm going to watch It's a Wonderful Life and blank.
My wife is saying from the other room, The Ref. So I'm going to say The Ref because my wife rocks.
Or 12 Angry Men.
And she said 12 Angry Men is another Jimmy Stewart movie that is a great one. And she's right. That's another great one.
See, that's the problem with this month, though. There's so many great Jimmy Stewart movies.
Oh,
and we only have so many weeks in the month that we're probably like, well, there's going to be another Jimmy Stewart month at some point, probably, in the future.
Well, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is another one that I think I would maybe pair with it, just because his character in that is so lovable, like a lot of his characters are. But in that movie, it's like I watched that again just a few years ago, and it stands the test of time because the same crap they were dealing with back then, we are still dealing with today. So. Mm-hmm. And I had a friend that was saying he was going to run for office. And I said, watch that movie first. So you watch Mr. Smith Goes to Washington first and see if you still want to run,
Right.
Brian, what do you got?
I'm going to stick to, I want to put this basically with To Kill a Mockingbird, because again, a nice classic black and white film with a lot of heart and message in it that I think is still even prevalent today. In terms of, like you said, with this here, the economic status, whatever the case is with Wonderful Life, it's the racial stuff and everything like that we have with, To Kill a Mockingbird. Plus, again, a great performance by Gregory Peck, another person of the time who is, by far leaps and bounds one of the best actors we've had of many generations. I would put those two together here for good old classics with great leading men.
Mine I would pair with, I'm going to throw in my Christmas Carol movie. I'm going to put in with my favorite version of that story. I'm going to do It's a Wonderful Life followed by a Muppets Christmas Carol. That is my favorite version of the Christmas Carol story. At least then we get the arc of Mr. Potter that we don't get in this movie. We get it there with the great Michael Caine with all the Muppets, and I think that's easily my favorite version of A Christmas Carol. And I mean,
some points with my wife in the other room, by the way. That's she likes that.
We got our little Sesame Street reference in this one, and then we get the Henson Company doing the Christmas Carol. So we get that little tie-in crossover between those two too.
Have you heard that there's a movie coming out about Jim Henson?
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited about it. Have you heard who's going to play him? Have they narrowed it down, or have they figured that out for sure?
I haven't heard yet, but I have a pitch.
So I had a list of like 7 people that I read online, and I didn't know if any of those were really the right one. As long as it's not Tom Hanks, please. So,
no,
who's your pitch?
My pitch is Kurt Russell's son, Wyatt Russell. He's already in the Disney family with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. He has an epic. He looks like Jim Henson.
Yeah, he does.
He could totally pull it off. I think he would be perfect for that.
This guy darkens his beard a little bit.
Yeah.
But you know what? I would be completely okay with that, because I think, even though it's for the success that Wyatt Russell has had already, I think that he's got so much more still coming to him. Like I absolutely cannot wait to see what he has coming.
There's some acting chops in that family over there between the Russells and the Hahns.
Yeah. It's like they know what they're doing or something.
Yeah.
Just a little bit.
All right, let's wrap this bad boy up into its nice little present here. So it's a wonderful life, available on Amazon Prime. Brian's son makes a cameo in this episode. I think that's our cue to wrap this thing up. Dad, we're ready for bed. So It's a Wonderful Life. Go check it out if you haven't watched it in a while. But let's get into our plugs here. You can find this show on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and to see our faces, we are on YouTube as well. So if you do want to check us out there. Brian, where can they find us on social media?
Social media, you can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Backlot605. Also join the conversation over on the Facebook South Dakota Film Community Group. We just like to throw everything out there and see what people are talking about and what people are watching.
Yeah, and if you need a little extra Backlot 605 content, you can find us on patreon.com/Backlot 605. That's basically our little subscriber base where you can get some exclusive posts and our exclusive bonus episodes each month, which there is a new one for last month's Francis Ford Coppola series where we talked about The Conversation. And this month we will be talking Vertigo on that. So you're getting your extra Hitchcock Jimmy Stewart collab there on patreon.com/Backlot 605. And special thanks to our patrons, Logan, Blake, Andy, Derek, Lou, Corey, and Darren. Thank you guys so much for helping to support the show. And next week, we are going to be kicking off our first Hitchcock and Jimmy Stewart movie, Rear Window, 1954's thriller classic Rear Window. Definitely going to be checking that out. As I saw there, John Small gave it a huge thumbs up, 2 thumbs up. So we do have a fan here. John, where can they find you online, and where can they find Sunny Radio online?
They can find me at johnandheidishow.com or bigjohnsmall.com, or I've got a bunch of other domains that my wife doesn't even know about all of them, so I'll just be quiet about that. And then Sunny Radio, you can find at sunnyradio.com. So, and on the radio dial, she says, at 93.3 FM in Sioux Falls.
Absolutely. Awesome. John, thank you again so much for joining us. This was a blast to talk about this movie with you.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely.
I never know where to look on here. I always feel really dumb. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I'm sorry that I don't know where the camera even is. So
that's all right. I'm usually looking up in the corner, and Casey's looking down in the corner, and
yeah,
I got to figure out where I'm pointing.
Our eye lines don't matter. It doesn't matter. They'll see our faces and they're like, maybe we should just listen to the audio instead. So, John,
now I know where to look. I'm just going to stare right there.
Thank you again. For Brian Mensing, I am Casey Kelderman. We will check y'all out next time on the Backlot of South Dakota.